if you're not going to supply the OT organizations with the tools they need, they're going to bring their own stuff in. And we're doing it now. This is not hyperbole. This is real.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Dino Busalaki.
And I'm Craig Duckworth. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that's really important to all of us as practitioners. When we go into the field, Dino, I want to talk about our ability to get data from industrial tools that we can use for projects that we're working on, that we're doing, that the client should be providing us for an overall project health of their environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it gets back to the true spirit of IT-OT convergence, right? Something that we hear a lot about, and the question is, should it really be in practice, right? And when we say be in practice, are the tools that are being chosen for assisting with cybersecurity in the OT environment? One, what role does OT play in the decision-making process and gaining access to the information that those tools are collecting within that industrial environment for a couple of different reasons. One is really to try to true up that asset inventory. Are you really getting the visibility that you should be getting, right? Because IT's perception of what that collection looks like and what OT's perception of what that looks like, it doesn't match up. And the reason why we recognize this as a disconnect is because an organization like ours, Design Group, is working in your manufacturing environments, right? We build plants, we implement machine centers, we do control system work, we build the infrastructure in that arena. And a lot of times we find clients have purchased OT cybersecurity tool, and yet none of the information that those tools are collecting is being presented to the folks that are out there working on your plant floor, working around these control systems.
Well, so if I take a step back from that and I play devil's advocate, I think I know the answer, but who is keeping that data? Where is the data going? And why are we as recipients of that work or practitioners being tasked to deliver a project in the environment? Why is it not being provided to us? What are we seeing that's keeping that from us?
Well, there's probably a few different reasons why that's happening. One is, my guess is IT still has a fair amount of unfamiliarity of exactly what's going on inside that plant and what those assets are and where they are. Yep. That's one. Two, IT probably doesn't really know, outside of threat hunting, right, which is probably all they're really thinking about is threat hunting, is what are the vulnerability and risk, of which there's a lot of them. You know, OT assets have been on the plant floor for decades, and they recognize you can't just patch things, but they're not really putting together a plan on how to improve. Because if they were, they would not only be working with the plant teams, but also the ecosystem and of partners, OEMs, system integrators, third parties that are also working in their plants, right? That should be, back to your statement, the recipients of this information. Again, 85% of the data that's being collected by these OT-IDS platforms is for the OT people to take action on. And so if we're in there designing and implementing a new packaging line for you, then we should have access to playbooks that you've developed, reporting that you develop, fair understanding of your current cybersecurity posture that you have, right? And what's prioritizing, what are you prioritizing in there? So that it's a collaborative relationship between the IT team, who's probably chosen this tool, and the OT teams that are out there actually putting their hands on these control systems. That's the disconnect. Again, getting back to IT-OT convergence, are you really doing it in the spirit and the truest sense of the whole reason why you picked an OT-IDS platform, you know? And if OT didn't participate at any level in that decision-making process, then they're probably not going to work with you, or at least not well. And we see that, right? I mean, we've got partners that sell these technologies that are working with very large clients, and we were also working in there on those clients in their manufacturing environment, and they're not able to deliver their technology further and deeper and wider into these industrial environments because
Yeah,
they can't get past the OT teams because they're not working with them.
I can see, when I think of the projects that we do on a daily basis, and I think of the clients that we work with, the benefit to us as a control systems integration team, as an AEC organization, how that data would benefit us and the client to provide that to us on a project. It's going to make the project go smoother. It's going to provide relevant information around the environment that we're going into to make sure that we can safely and efficiently put the equipment in. So there's a lot of reasons that I think that it makes sense for that collaboration spirit that you're talking about to bring that data to the partner that's helping you on that project.
Right. Well, and to be quite frank, if they're not sharing and they're not supporting, or let's say they haven't chosen a tool, they don't even have anything, which, there's a lot of clients that haven't done anything. We're bringing on our own set of tools, right?
Yeah.
So we can be successful in there, which is the next step in this journey is that the industrial ecosystem, these OT collaborators, which is your OEMs and your system integrators and your local process engineering teams, plant teams, they're just going to go down their own path.
Yeah, they are.
Be successful, right? Because they know that we all understand that we have to improve our cybersecurity posture. We have to get better from an OT perspective in providing cyber-ready, cyber-safe technologies within these environments. And so if IT is going to stay at the periphery and not engage, then we will go on the journey without them. Then you'll end up with multiple tools in your environment. Potentially, IT will pick a tool, OT is going to pick a tool. This plant's going to pick that tool. That plant's going to pick that tool. That OEM is going to come in with this. That SI is going to come in with this. And then you end up with a splattering of different technologies, like we've seen with remote access, right? We've seen that with remote access in these environments where there's no standardization. And so the teams bring whatever they need to the table to be successful. And so the question for CIOs and CISOs is, how are you going to change this perspective? Right? How are you going to get your organization more in tune and ingrained in what's going on with your plants? And more importantly, who are the plants working with?
Well, and again, my view on this is there's a disconnect there. You have a CISO or a CIO or someone that's maybe they're responsible for that, but they really don't have the expertise or the skill sets to manage that, or they're not familiar with the plant environment or the industrial control area or the tools and technology that they are leveraging may not be the right tools and technologies that are OT centric for that environment to give us or give someone that data. Maybe they just don't know.
Well, the question is, it's still oil and water, right? Between IT and OT. Are you still in that mindset? And when we see that, right? I mean, we see organizations that they don't play well together, and there's resource constraints. The IT team, quite frankly, doesn't have enough people. If you've got 20, 30, 50, 100 plants in your fleet, to be able to have an organization broad enough to be able to really understand that all of your plants are not the same. They're not set up the same. They got different automation technologies. Their network infrastructure, is set up in various ways, with no intended strategy. And we know this because one of the things we go looking for when we first engage is show me your documentation. Show me your high-level network design. Show me your network design. Show me the architecture. And that stuff is, if they either don't have it or what they have is wrong, and so we're marking a lot of it off.
For sure.
So there's a lot of unknowns, right? And I think IT they just don't want to fight that battle because you'd have to have people living and breathing and working that plant on a pretty regular, consistent basis, right? What do we say? You got to think global, but you got to act local. And the only way you can act local is you got to work with those folks that are in those plants every day, all day, making that place run. They're the ones that are in the best spot, in the best position to describe how this place is set up and how it works and what's in place and who's there to help them. When does this vendor come in? When does that vendor come in? How does that machine work? What are we doing this month in regards to our maintenance schedules and downtimes that we're working on? They're the ones that are closest to that activity to be able to implement and execute some of this work to help improve that cybersecurity posture. And again, like I said, if you're not going to supply the OT organizations with the tools they need, they're going to bring their own stuff in. And we're doing it now. right? This is not, hyperbole. This is real, right?
Real,
We're
yeah.
going in there with our own stuff.
Yeah.
And even for clients who have a tool, and we're talking to the OT guys, it's like, oh, you got Armis in here. You're an Armis shop. We know that. Okay, great. I'm looking for this report. Let me see your dashboard. Let me see your asset inventory. I want to know what the vulnerabilities are in here. I'm trying to find this piece out about your network. And I don't know. I don't have it. They're not, whatever. And it's like, why is that? And so I blame the vendors who sell this, their partners and or the vendors who sell this to an IT organization, because they're not helping them, with that transition all the way into the environment, right?
Oh, true.
And so then you have groups like ours who are in there who are starting to get smarter and who are starting to ask these questions. And if we're talking to the wall, right, nothing's coming back, we're just talking to the wall, then we're going to go do what we need to do to be successful.
But when a systems integrator or a firm like ours goes into that environment, they know there's a tool there. Are there certain steps, certain questions that we could ask? How do you think the most successful path, let's call it a path, to get that data, that sharing, that cooperation between the two different teams? What's the best avenue to begin having those conversations? Have you seen something work better than something else? We can tell you what doesn't work, and that's what we run into every day. Is when we're holding it close to our chest, we're not sharing, we're not giving it out. That's the cloak and dagger. Is really, we're past that. The ecosystem needs to grow up, mature, needs to start figuring this out. But are there things that make sense?
Well, ideally, because we're working locally, right, is, when you're asking the plant, who is the owner, right? They might just say, well, IT is. Well, who in IT? Who specifically is responsible? Who's calling the shots, right? Who could they go to? And sometimes they're not even sure. I always welcome the opportunity for those IT teams to get close enough to the activity that's going on in the plant, and start asking questions and learning, which is what most of them are doing, right? If I'm talking to an IT person and, I start talking about HMIs and PLCs and the next words out of their mouth is, what are those things? Well, then, you're starting
you're in a wrong spot.
Zero, right? They don't even know, right? And so then there's a whole new learning curve for that, right? And again, you got one or two people, you got 50 plants in your fleet, that's not going to cut it, right? And the IT model, from a managed services employee, PMOs, I see that becoming more prevalent in the OT space because it's very difficult to develop a practice, to be able to manage this, because it's all net new. There's a tremendous amount of data that's going to come flying up out of that plant floor when you put these tools in place. They get overwhelmed very quickly, the whole alert fatigue. And so they just give up. Right, because they don't even know IT doesn't know how to organize these challenges, right? They just don't. What's the priority? What's the life cycle of these assets? Where are they at on the capital plan to be replaced? When's your next expansion project, your brownfield, your greenfield, your downtime windows? Who are the vendors that you're working with? What are they doing for you? Have you talked to them about making cyber-ready machines? If those discussions aren't being had, then you need to insert an organization that knows how to do this into the mix to help that.
Yeah. Those are all questions that a good partner can help lead for internally within the organization. Those are valid. Those are concerns. Those are ways to help begin getting better.
Yeah. And you have to do your homework, right? You just can't assume that the system integrator that you're working with that happens to be a Clarity partner. It's like, well, what have you done and where? Right. There's one thing to stand the system up. That's not difficult, standing these things up, right?
Right.
It's really what happens after that? What's going on after that?
Yeah.
Now you've sold in this stuff and you've got it running in the plant and they're seeing a third of the assets. What's next? Right. And so if you're a client talking to a partner who's saying, hey, I can do OT cybersecurity for you. Oh, yeah, great. Where have you done it? Who the reference is? Can I go talk to that client? Especially if they're not in a competitive nature, where that conversation can be had. Because, you and I both know that we have clients who are willing to be spokespeople to other clients, as long as there's no conflict, they're perfectly fine with having that conversation, right? So clients, you need to consider that, right? So when you're working with a partner who's says they're in the cybersecurity space, good, great. Even if it's on the IT side, if you're working with an IT VAR, says, yeah, we sell Clarity, we sell Armis, we do Dragos, we do Cisco. Great. Where have you done it? And what have you done? And who's that client? And can I talk to them?
Yeah, well, that's important. No different than when they're trying to vet a systems integrator for a controls project or an AEC firm to build a building. In our personal lives, we go to buy a car. You and I both know that everyone's going to research that car. There's things that they like about a particular model: Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Jeep, Mercedes. Depends on the price range. They're looking for certain things. They're doing research. Organizations have to do the same. They got to research and understand what they're doing.
Well, and to take your car analogy a little further, there's one thing: are you the buyer and the driver of the car, or are you the guys that can actually build the car, right?
There's
and
a
these
difference.
engineering groups can build the car. We can build the car. And so there's a difference between selling the vehicle and building the vehicle. Right?
Oh, huge difference.
And so as an organization, you need to work with engineering companies who can build a car.
Right.
Because they're the ones that know what it takes to build that car and what's going into that car. They know the technology in that car. They know how it's being designed and programmed and configured and the networks that are in it. It's not the person who's buying the car. It's the people building the car. You got to get past that godlike mentality that some of these IT organizations have that think they're the smartest cats in the room. And it's like, well, that's fine over there in the data center. Let's go talk about your plant floor and what's going on there.
Well, again, a great way to identify that up front when organizations are trying to figure this path out and navigate this journey is a tabletop exercise. One of the very first things that we recommend is let's do a tabletop exercise with the C-suite to understand alignment, to understand who is going to own this. Back to your question, who owns this? Who has responsibility and authority to implement it? Walk the plant floor with those individuals and open a panel with the plant manager or the controls engineer and say, okay, these are the assets that we want to talk about. These PLCs, these drives, this HMI, these IOs, and let them understand this is not about the PCs and about the laptops in the IT environment. We are talking specifically about industrial control networks and assets that are out here on the floor and how they are connected to the enterprise and the value of the data that comes up. You know, organizations like Design Group, we have that ability to provide those insights. You talk about it's not real hard to install the tools, technology, and it's not. But when you sit down and prioritize risk and you begin looking at vulnerability management tools and you start putting together programs to begin assessing and mitigating that risk, it's important to understand that process.
There's understanding, but more importantly, who's that asset owner going to be most comfortable with and having that conversation with?
I think we know the answer to that.
Right?
Yeah.
Who's credible?
Yep.
Who's accountable? And who is a plant manager and his or her staff that's out there helping them run that plant day in and day out? Who are they going to feel more comfortable with when they're in there talking about their control systems? And it's not necessarily going to be some IT person that shows up maybe once a year or every other year and just touches pieces of the network. And maybe there's been some bad experiences because things that IT have done, like with firewalls or pushing patches or making configuration changes or doing denial of service attacks while they're doing, you know, port scans and things of that, net scans and that type of activity that's been disruptive.
Yep.
And pen testing, you know, things that they've witnessed that the plant's like, why am I going to let you come down here and try to help me with something? Because every time you show up, you just create headaches for me.
Yeah. My project gets delayed. My project costs twice as much money.
Down. You know, I lost my production for 30 minutes or a day or two or whatever, a couple hours. And that gets back to that oil and water and that IT-OT collision, as we call it, versus convergence. So that being said, they need to start working with the folks that are most credible to them. Again, the people who can build the car, the people who are building their cars in their plants are the ones that they need to really lean on to help them on this journey.
Yeah, no, spot on.
And as a C-suite, if you're listening to this, you're going to have to get past what IT is telling you because they're only telling you half the story.
There's three sides to every story. There's my side, there's your side, and somewhere woven intricately in the middle is the truth that has
Like
pieces
sports,
of, yeah, pieces of both sides. But at the end of the day, it's not one side. There's not a silver bullet. It's how do you get to the truth? How do
Well, you're
you
missing one of the legs of the stool, in my opinion, right? It's a three-legged stool, and you're missing one of the key components. You're missing one of the legs, and that is the input and activity that's being performed by those groups of people who design and build those machines and who maintain and support those, and the people who operate them.
Well, again, if you're not a magician, you shouldn't try to balance a two-legged stool. It's not beneficial.
I place some of the responsibility on the shoulders of these firms who are selling this technology and selling it to the CISO and calling it a day.
Right.
In the meantime, we're in the same plant, the same client, working in many of their plants, and they got this cool tool, and it's not being shared, right?
And no one's using
part of it, right?
Yeah, no, 1,000% agreed. If you're looking at this holistically from an organization, then you need to start treating it holistically. And enterprise does not mean only your IT and non-revenue producing assets. It is the enterprise. That means everything, the entire organization. And until clients, organizations, CISOs begin treating it that way, there's always going to be the divide.
And where does that begin? I mean, and there has to be some forced collaboration.
Yeah, there does.
On multiple sides, right? To put these people together, as I used to say back in the day, get all the liars in the same room and get past the finger pointing game, and let's really try to move this ball. And we can sit and say that because the work that we do, we're the ones that are in your plant, and we're touching the control systems. And if you're not talking to us, then you're missing the boat.
Yeah, for sure. You can't just install it and walk away from it. That's no longer good enough. Great discussion, Dino. I know hopefully that's a hot topic that everybody takes to heart, can go back to their organization and say, how are we doing this? Are we sharing this data with our systems integrators, with our OEMs that we're looking to better our operations? And if the answer is no, you got to take a step back and say, why not? They're there to help you. Let them have access to the data. Show them what your environment is. Show them what they can do to help make you more successful. Everybody wins every time.
Yeah. If IT/OT convergence is something that you believe in and something that you think that you're doing, then you should have a list of every manufacturer, OEM, system integrator who's in there messing with your control systems.
Yeah.
To be on your
speed dial.
And they should be part of the discussion when you're talking about cybersecurity. What are you doing? Here's what we expect you to be doing. Here's our plan. Here's our roadmap. Here's our security framework. If those conversations aren't being had with those organizations and you don't have a comprehensive list of who those people are, then you are not practicing IT/OT convergence.
Totally agreed. Yep. Beautiful. Well, for anybody that's got questions, you can reach out to us, follow us on our podcast. Feel free to drop us a line. We're here to help in any way that we can. You guys have a great day. Thanks, Dino, for a fantastic conversation.
Be safe. Have a great holiday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.